Welcome to another episode of Science Behind the Magic, and I have the wonderful C.L. Clark here with me today, who is the author of, I think the series is called Magic of the Lost, which starts with The Unbroken, continues with The Faithless, and recently we got the trilogy finale, The Sovereign, and they are stunning together. Like, if you like collecting books, Orbit didn't do us dirty. They're all like the same height, and they look amazing next to each other. And I think I heard rumor, because this came out the same year as the Jasmine Throne, and you guys had similar cover designers, because all three of your books have like similar color schemes that go next to them, I think.
We have the same designer, in fact.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the art on these covers is amazing. Having now read The Sovereign, this is a cruel cover, but it's amazing. So, yeah, actually, I might ask a question later on about which one might be your favorite, make you choose. Although I remember on social media how much you loved the Unbroken's cover, so maybe that'll be your favorite. But let's get into it. I always like to start with these with kind of a broad question of, why did you choose to become an author? You know, what about this creative craft brought you to it? And, you know, why did a story like this one come out of that? I know you also have a new novella that came out this year, and you've worked in the arcane world. But yeah, what brought you to trying writing out as like a full-time or, you know, a large part of your part-time vocation, whichever one you chose?
Well, I do write full-time now. But I've been telling stories since I was a little kid. I was always the one who was on long car rides. I was like, okay, guys, we're going to have a ghost story. And I think that's kind of funny, actually, because I'm the biggest scaredy cat. I don't even read much horror anymore, but I was a big Goosebumps kid. And so I would just start making up stuff every time we were driving some hour-long trip from Kansas City to Topeka or whatever. And always was the make-believe kid. And I think it was pretty natural to go from that kind of childhood or internal world to writing, especially because in my head, my two options were this. I either want to be an actor or I want to be a writer. And both of those were just ways for me to do something cooler than the real world. So I wanted to be in like The Lord of the Rings, or I wanted to write The Lord of the Rings, but there wasn't really a chance for, I guess I always also wanted to be a soccer player, but that dream got crushed fairly quickly when I couldn't make like, you know, a college team. So I was just like, all right, well, we pivot. Yeah.
Nice. And so you brought up Lord of the Rings. What are some authors that really inspired you to pick fantasy and like those types of stories that you would want to act in or write? Like, why fantasy or science fiction? I know you said Goosebumps was cool, but maybe not horror. But what were some of your inspirations?
I actually did not get into sci-fi for a very long time, not until I was in grad school, really. I read Ancillary Justice. So when I was a kid, it was almost all fantasy all the time. I'm definitely on record with Wheel of Time being one of my big tentpole kind of series that got me into adult fantasy beyond like, you know, all of the, like every kid's book basically is fantasy. Everything from, you know, watching The Magic School Bus to the Bridge to Terabithia. I think that's what it was called. Terabithia? Yeah, something like that. The Magic Treehouse. I think that's the one that I read the most. But all of that kind of stuff was just something else. And then also I was like, one of my favorite movies was The Sword and the Stone. So I was always into swords and the idea of knightly ridiculousness. I definitely think that particular movie is probably not where I get a lot of my obsession with knighthood. It was a very different vision. But I did really love the squirrel sequence.
Oh my gosh, it's so heart-wrenching and perfect.
Yeah, I know. Which that's probably where, if anything, it's the seed for my tragic romance bent. I think that sequence, that movie. But I think fantasy, yeah, so the Wheel of Time started, and then I had like an older kind of brother. Oh.
I don't know. It happens to be on video chat sometimes. I don't know why.
Oh, that was a surprise and delight. yeah, I had this older brother figure who found out that I liked The Wheel of Time, and he's like, "Oh, hold on, I got you." And he showed up with a stack of books. One of them was Ender's Game, so I guess that was probably my my first my first space opera type thing. And then the second one, this is just going to keep
Wild.
happening.
I think it's great. I don't know if you're using an iPhone to record, but it might be that one.
Oh, yes, I am. Okay, that solves that mystery. The second one he gave me was the Drizzt Do'Urden series.
Oh yeah.
So R.A. Salvatore, and that is a very large series, The Forgotten Realms. And so from there, I just went from like all the Drizzt Do'Urden, the Icewind Dale series. I found Dragonlance Chronicles. I think at some point I realized that all the books I wanted were in the adult section. So the library wouldn't let me check them out without a permission slip. And my dad got really mad. He's like, look, this 10-year-old, or I don't know, it's probably like 12, this 12-year-old wants to read books and I have to come in here and sign, like, give the kid the books and leave me out of it. So he went and signed my thing. And from then on, I was, you couldn't stop me. And like I read everything I could in the fantasy section of the library. So actually, because I got such early access into the adult fantasy side of things, there are a lot of the young fantasy stuff I didn't actually find until much later, like Alana and all the other Tamora Pierce series. But it was a good time.
Yeah, no, I mean, Tamora Pierce is also a blind spot for me growing up for some reason. I found Philip Pullman first, and so then I went that way. But no, that's really interesting hearing about all those things, especially the squirrel scene. Because now I should tell people, if they don't know what this series is about, there will be a review on my channel. But the Unbroken, being the first book in Magic of the Lost, it's a trilogy primarily about these two individuals, although they're not our only two perspectives. We have Luca, and I'm actually really curious, is it pronounced Touraine or Touraine?
Touraine for the general audience, yeah.
Because I asked my husband, who can speak French, how he would say it, and he said it Touraine, and I was like, oh, interesting. But there are these two individuals, and on the cover here, this is Touraine, and she has been a conscripted soldier her whole life. She's really trying to prove that if you work within the system, you will be rewarded. And Luca is someone who is supposed to be the next head of the empire and is being prevented to by her uncle. And so we meet these two individuals in, I believe it's pronounced Quizal, or I'll be honest, I do the fantasy reading thing where I recognize groups of letters and I never try to say them out loud. And Luca's trying to prove that she can handle a rebellion, and Touraine's trying to prove that she's loyal. And pretty much within 70 pages, plans do not go as foreseen. And that is the type of chaos that I love throughout the entire trilogy. And I think you do something really amazing in taking kind of a standard tentpole rebellion trilogy and really make it feel grounded and magical and very fulfilling by the end. It never feels too rushed, anything we're trying to do here. And although if you love characters that are chaotic and messy and you want to kind of hit books at them, they are very consistent in their mess throughout this entire thing. And I guess what I wanted to know is, it felt like this was grounded in the history of the Mediterranean area. And I'm not sure if that's true, but I was wondering, what research did you do for the history of this series, maybe even some of the medical, military, the sword play? There's just so much that feels really grounded and really adds to how well built this world is that you put together.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I did do some deliberate specific research for the book, and I also did not do deliberate and specific research. So to explain, when I was an undergrad, French was one of my degrees, my areas of study. And so a lot of the information I got came from, on the English literature side, which was the other one, my post-colonial literary theory classes, and on the French side, Francophone African literature, which is that all of it is about being colonized by the French, because how else would you have Francophone African literature? And so different writers have different feelings about it, different authors writing in both French and English, talking about how they feel about writing in these colonial languages versus writing in a native tongue. And then also when I wanted to go deeper into that feeling for my own interest, but also for the book, because later on I did realize that I wanted to directly, I don't know that I wanted ever for it to be a one-to-one thing, which is why some of the names don't match up. But I did want people to think, oh, a lot of these names are kind of French, or they certainly sound French. And these names do kind of sound Arabic, or they are Arabic and stuff. So I wanted people to be able to make the connections without saying, this is really France, and this is really Algeria, or really Morocco, or something like that. So there was a lot of research in that way. I also did just read more on colonial theory on my own, but I also studied Arabic during my master's so that I could do more travel and intertextual studies, like between all of the different languages I could access. And there are actually still plenty of actual native languages of North Africa that I don't know. So it's a very incomplete study, obviously, but it's impossible really for the sake of this book to even include everything. So as far as the groundedness and the reality of it, so much is about hinting at what is deeper below the surface with really choice details and choice implications, even if we can't see maybe the root causes of something. And as for the sword play, I do swords, which is fun. I did not do swords at the time of the Unbroken coming out, but I did as of the Faithless. I'd started doing longsword and some single sword stuff, but yeah.
Is that why Sabine had to make an appearance? I love Sabine.
Sabine existed in the first book, in the Unbroken. She gets a mention. I did not realize how much she would steal my heart, and thus also how much page space she would end up getting in the second. I never actually expected her to have so much page space and to become, for me, such an integral part of the story. But it was a bonus that I could use some of my sword knowledge into her. Also, though, I have a lot of background just in like athletics and sport and body stuff, because in addition to the literary studies, I was also a personal trainer, and I studied for that for a while. And yeah, it's everything you do is still useful in some way. It comes out in odd places.
Yeah, I think as someone, I myself I struggle in action scenes in books. I think you really bring out like the physicality of what's happening in the moment. So I can feel really emotionally and like physically fatigued or with the character. And I think that's a really useful way of doing action scenes. I don't know if that was intentional, but I really enjoyed that, especially when you're in a lot of the chaotic battle scenes that we have throughout the trilogy. Mm-hmm. So speaking of, you never knew Sabine was going to really show up and be as a part of it. Was there a character that came first in terms of our two leads? Was it Luca or Terrain that came first? Was Terrain always there, and then you realized this is a dual POV sort of situation?
Terrain was always there. She was the very first image I saw. The first thing I ever saw was there was a soldier who was in a firing squad, and she was killing her own people. That was the first image that came to me. And later, I don't remember how the brainstorming process went, but I did think, oh, there'll be a companion, like the love interest will be a royal. And because I just love the soldier royal, bodyguard royal type trope. Obviously, it got more complicated than that when I actually finished the book. But yeah, it was Terrain always. I think I was most interested in her grappling with that sort of internal treachery. And then Luca did get more interesting as I tried to figure out what that struggle would feel like for her, that battle between power and what is theoretically better for other people, but not for you. So.
Yeah. And I really love your commitment to how obviously we are all people, we all go through life, we change, as do these characters, although I think it's only 2 or 3 years from like the beginning of the trilogy to the end. I could be wrong about the exactness, but it's not like a decade. It's a fairly short period of time, and a lot of traumatic things are happening in the course of it. And so, for example, the end of the Faithless, things happen. I'm going to be spoiler free about it, but there is a sort of route Luca could have gone that would have felt good and felt familiar. And same with Terrain, but you go, no, these are still the same chaotic, distrustful people within themselves and each other. And that leads to a lot of frustrating, but I think realized, you know, it's like, well, yeah, of course she's doing this. She did dumb stuff in the first book we didn't like, and for very similar reasons. Like there is growth, but there's also, it's dissatisfying in a very engaging way. So how does that process look for you when you're trying to like tease out what these characters are going to do? Like Terrain's one of my favorite characters I think I've read in a really long time because of her complexity, and when especially she still is annoying in ways where I'm like, why are you doing the thing? But by the end of the Unbroken, I do feel like she has found peace within a lot of her motivations, and I really love having that tentpole. And so I'm just wondering, like, what is the process when you're meeting these characters and like basically stretching out what they would or wouldn't do versus maybe as an author, you're planning a story. It's like, it would be nice if they did this instead. Like it would be nice.
Well, I think part of it is that if I go the route that, oh, it would be nice, then the story's over, right? And it's not only is it over, but it's over in a kind of unsatisfactory, well, yeah, I mean, obviously that's the right answer, but it's not interesting. And then on the other hand, it's just like, I certainly don't know a single person who has made every single correct choice in their life, not even in their adult life, when they have a fully functioning frontal lobe. Like the decisions, even if they are made from 100% the right place, even if they seem logically sound, you can't always control other factors that are involved, namely 50 million other people who have the exact opposite desire as you. And like the conflict when those things happen. And sometimes you are not the strongest actor in the scene, and their action displaces yours. And so I think that's part of it. And as a writer, I'm like 9 times out of 10, I guess every once in a while, I'm like, well, you guys can have some relaxation as a treat. But most of the time I'm looking for what's going to be the most interesting for me to watch, like as a reader, as a writer, what will be interesting to discover, how people act under certain pressures. And part of it is like, how would I act? How do I think somebody else acts? And sometimes it's just answering questions that I have about human nature and what would it take for a human to make this change or that change. Yeah.
And so a change that we have in the Faithless from the Unbroken is you give us point of views from Pruitt, who we meet in the Unbroken, and then a new character, Philly, which I thought was really interesting. And I really love the payoff later on. I don't know. I feel like I'm in a world where publishing and a lot of books are really fast these days. And this still feels like it makes sense, your inspirations. It's not as long as The Wheel of Time, but I feel like there's a lot of that payoff of like, this seed was planted here and literally really got to blossom later on in the trilogy. But when did you meet Philly, and when did you decide, Pruitt, she cannot just be Terrain's like side piece that we first met early on. She's going to have her own story. Like, when did that come about?
That's actually a really good question. I don't know when Pruitt took center stage in her own right.
Because I mean, she is a big player for the second and third book, and like she snuck up on me.
Yeah, she snuck up on me as well, because I knew that I was setting her up for, shall we say, points of interest in the second book. But by the time I got to some of the conversations she and Terrain have in the third book, I found myself really stricken by her and her argument. I think part of it is that a very small part of me wishes that I had kept Thibaut alive so that all three friends could be kind of this, like, three different opposing structures all against each other. And if I'd kept Thibaut alive, then there probably would have been a lot more Cazal scenes, and then maybe like all three of them would have gone to war against each other. Who knows? It would have been a very
It's a very
obvious
different
metaphor.
series. Yeah.
Yeah, there would be a very different series. I'm not entirely sure that I won't write it under a different label, so I'm just going to keep writing the same series over and over again until something makes sense inside me. But there's also, I think, the idea that I don't think Pruitt is wrong. I think Pruitt might be the smartest one in this situation out of all of these little POVs. Certainly, I think she's vindicated for all of her anger and stuff, which is also why. Well, I won't say anything else because that would be spoilery. But yeah, so I like Pruitt. And I think this is going to sound kind of silly, but I remember watching the newer Catra, Shira series. I say Catra probably because Catra is my favorite character. But with the new series, the relationship between Shira and Catra, I was watching, I was like, oh, this is Terrain and Pruitt. Except, like, who goes where is a little bit more complicated. The morality of it is a little more adult, and but essentially it's two kids raised on the bad guy side, and one of them is willing to leave, one of them is not. One of them has a lot of anger bottled up inside of them. The other is willing to, like, drop things. So obviously very different results if you've seen Shira, the TV show, but there was just something about them and about that relationship and about Catra's longing for Shira to stay with her and Pruitt's similar longing, just to different results, I think, as you find in the Sovereign.
No, and I mean, I think she almost sneaks up on herself too a little bit, because I think in the first book she's almost like too understanding of everything. She's just, which is kind of her survival mode, right, with how she grew up, and then the anger that just like slowly gets released in the Faithless, and it's on its other level in the Sovereign. I thought, like you said, it's very earned. And I mean, I do love, as you read this trilogy, it's like there's a lot of people with similar goals, and I don't necessarily know if anyone's doing it right at any given point, but I think that's the mess that comes with these types of situations. And I appreciate that also, and because I do want to talk about the magic a little bit, but this was always a human story, and you never stopped having it be about humans and community. It was never, okay, we all need to come together because now there's this big bad we have to fight.
Oh, I hate that. I hate that.
It happens a lot. We've read a lot of fantasy that is a kind of a predictable sort of situation. It's like, well, we were dealing with restructuring the government, but now we all have to come together and fight this thing. And I was pretty sure that was never going to happen. But although we do get that withering and stuff, and so I was wondering, when did magic enter this in this form with the gods and the different, and how our characters learn about it and the histories of them? Because you kind of have three very interconnected, like, religious-based magic systems. I'm still not even convinced they're not all from the same religion, but like, because that's not the point of the trilogy, isn't to like unpack all of the magic, although I eat that stuff up. And so I was wondering, when did those come in, and was it actually like always there, and you were just deciding when to like place the threads for different moments? Because that's also like a big reason why I feel we need Philly in this story.
I think the magic came in very late, partly because I originally didn't want there to be any magic at all. Partly because I thought humans can do enough damage to each other on their own, and I wanted to express that just with swords instead of atomic bombs or whatever. But at some point, I needed to figure out economies. I needed to figure out why the colonization was happening in the first place. And I didn't really want it to just be, oh, they have gold or something like that. I was like, well, this is fantasy, so let's make it interesting. They have magic that they want. And so that was part of it. And then technically there are four. I have four magics. There is the fourth magic belongs to the monks and the Southern Mountains.
Oh, okay.
But until I do a spinoff of like Josh's past, we won't really go into that very much, I think. But it's mind magic. And I'm trying to think when did it go in? I came up with the economies and stuff and how we got to the colonization. And I think that's when I just was like, okay, it's going to be healing magic. And I think from then on, it was just a matter of keeping it to a low burn. And because it was something that the Balladarans were always looking for, I knew it would have to come out eventually. But even I don't know that I fully anticipated to what extent it would become a major part in the rest of the series. But then the publisher decided that we would name it the Magic of the Lost series. So I was like, well, I guess we're doing magic now, y'all. But also the the concept for the animal magic came when I was writing a short story of the Sands war days, and I think I just needed a cool bad guy, and I thought, let's have some werebears, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and like you kind of you're understanding, like the werebears aren't even like the terrifying part. It's how they become the werebears that's the terrifying part,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something your publisher does a really good job at the top of each of your books. They always have these pithy lines, like the first one's every empire demands revolution. The second one's every queen will take her due. And that third one is every god will claim a sacrifice. And like you say you love tragedies, and like the sacrifices that people have to do. I don't think there's 4 or 5 scenes. I know you were cackling when you knew what emotions we would all be going through in that.
I was probably not cackling. I was probably weeping as I wrote them. And I don't cackle until after, when everyone starts texting me or sending me pictures.
Nice. So when did you decide we need to, because I think what you did is so obvious, but I've actually never read it before, which doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's, we have the rebellion in Quizal. That's pretty standard. The empire is occupying this land. They don't want to be occupied. But then we have the rebellion at home, when one of our main characters is the empire. And then we have another now main character who is being potentially a part of the Fingers and things like that. And is our little glimpse into that land's forgotten magic. So when did she show up?
Oh, Philly, yeah. I don't know when she showed up, but I did know that I needed somebody else who had some information. And now that you're asking me this, I do actually, I'm gonna try and find in my notes or like all of my old drafts when she popped up, because I don't remember Philly as a figment of my imagination, like deliberately. I think there was definitely me trying to figure out, how is Luca going to get access to Balladeur's magic. And for a while, I think that the little scholar, the scholar noble, he was going to be the way in, but then I decided that for reasons, I needed less of him and more of Sabine instead. So that did not work out as well for him as a conduit, shall we say. And then as I figured that I wanted the Empire to have more struggles, well, I guess I didn't decide they needed to have more struggles. I just think inherently an empire begets many struggles. specifically from people that they oppress, regardless of where those people might come from. And I probably watched too much Les Miserables or something.
That's a question on my page, just so you know.
And so I do know at some point I did say, oh, I want there to be a empty chairs and empty tables scene for Philly. And so that does happen, sort of, in a manner of speaking, but not until, I think that scene that I envisioned doesn't really happen until book 3. But eventually she just became the face of the rebellion at home, because I wanted to know what the poor Balladarans thought about their nobility, as well as the Khazali who were immigrating. There's also the fact that I wanted to explore what it feels like to immigrate to your colonial metropole. One of the research things that I remember watching, it's a movie / documentary, Ici on noie les Algériens, which means here we drown Algerians. It was some graffiti that was posted over the Seine, over a bridge over the Seine. And so obviously French sentiment towards incoming Algerians was not great. You can see that if you go to Paris now. And much like any former empire state, how they deal with the former subjects who then move to the metropole for a better life. And so I wanted to explore that a bit as well, which also required, for me at least, a point of view from that population, which is another reason also that I wanted the next book to take place in Ballader.
So going back to, you wanted to maybe act one day, you like Les Mis, and I noticed this in the first book, but when I was reading The Sovereign, I'm like, this is a song from Les Mis that is this chapter title. I'm not crazy anymore. It was One Day More where I was finally like, I'm on to this now. I was curious, what goes into your chapter titles? Because you do a lot of the family and then the family reprise. Like, and for those who maybe aren't in musical theater, a reprise is like a version of that song, but it's maybe a little shorter, it's a little changed. You also use variation. So what made you lean on kind of the tools that are usually used for albums or musical theater and stuff like that in your chapter titles?
Because you noticed the Les Mis one, I will also say there is a Hamilton reference in Faithless. It's the world upside down, the world turned upside down, that sort of post-battle song. Yeah, I'm a big musical nerd, but only for certain musicals. So if a true musical nerd ever came to me and said, oh, Guys and Dolls, I'd be like, I don't know, sorry. I know the big ones and I enjoy them very thoroughly. I have a standing date to go see Wicked with one of my besties. I wept when I went to see it in the movie theater last year, just sitting me in the dark, just sobbing by myself. So I feel a lot of things about them. But I also was a musician. I played the cello. So I played a lot of songs that were like, oh, this is a variation of this. And when I listen to soundtracks, something that I love the most is getting reprisals, especially when there's a key shift. Oh, it's so sexy. And it just hits you in some really hard ways. Like this is probably the song that made me understand the power of it, which also shows a lot about me. So in Kingdom Hearts, there's a song called Dearly Beloved. And then when you beat the game, you get Dearly Beloved Reprise, which listen to the two of those. And I feel like you will understand a lot of things about me, but also kind of the tone shifts in the book chapter reprisals. But also another big one for me was Game of Thrones, how everyone gets every house gets a theme. And the way Ramin Djawadi does the Lannisters is utter genius to me. So we start with the base song, The Rains of Castamere. Each character gets a slight different variation. We know that stuff's about to pop off when we get the really dark version of that song. We hear it in threads of other songs. So like the Light of the Seven is in theory a priestly song, but at different parts of it, you get the Lannister theme throughout because it's a big part of Cersei's backstory, or not backstory, present story, I guess. But this is when it really struck me, is when I was watching House of the Dragon, completely removed from the tragedy of the Game of Thrones seasons for that house. But we see this sort of parade of soldiers in red, and a very jaunty sort of parade trumpety version of the Lannister theme. And you've never heard it this happy before because they all suck and they're all dying. But I was like, this can't be that. What? So I knew who these writers were without even seeing them. And that kind of signification has always just like, it's a magic power. And this is just some, like the chapter titles in this case were just some very small way of me trying to capture that for the novel as well on the page.
Yeah. I mean, I really love it in The Unbroken. I mean, I'm on record saying I think The Unbroken is like a pretty perfect novel for me and my tastes and everything like that. I think.
Thank you.
I mean, obviously it's the start of a trilogy, and the trilogy itself, I think, is like very great and well completed. But like, I could read The Unbroken as a standalone over and over again because of that like callback that you do quite often. There's a lot of satisfying like conclusions and explorations of things. In particular, though, I think a theme that I don't know if it was intentional on your part, but like the themes of motherhood and like parentage throughout the books. But in particular, when you have Terrain and Philly and their relationships with their mothers, like the Jackal is an amazing character.
Yes.
Like, I mean, when I look at where Terrain and the Jackal are by the end of the trilogy and their first meeting in The Unbroken, it's just like, it's a wild situation. So I was wondering, and then obviously Luca has her complex parentage with her uncle and things like that. But I do feel it's stronger with Philly and Terrain. So when did that become a theme that you knew like you were going to give these characters the space to like affect us in that way, I guess?
It was the last thing. It was so the running gag for me, at least in my head, is book 1 is mommy issues, book 2 is daddy issues, book 3 is ex-girlfriends. For both of them, really. But
I mean, that could actually be the new part. I think that's actually a very good way of pitching them.
Yeah. So with The Unbroken, the Jackal did not exist until I was on my very, very last draft, to the point where I was like, if this book doesn't find an agent, I'm putting it in the trunk and it stays there. I'm going to go work on something else. And a friend was like, look, just do it one more time. There's something here. Just do it one more time. And I said, fine, but I'm putting every thought I have ever had into this. And one of the thoughts that I had was Terrain had a brother, and he wasn't really doing a whole lot. It was a very weak, structurally weak character in terms of the narrative. And there was just this gap of a question: what happened to their parents? If they are siblings, what happened to their parents? If there's anything that can ever bring siblings together or push them apart, it is, what do we do about mom and dad? And one of the things I was also just dealing with as a reader was like, well, everyone's always talking about like dead mom syndrome. And I was, well, yeah, there are a lot of dead moms, dead parents, but especially dead moms. And my first instinct was just like, they're dead. Easier just to not deal with it. And so the idea that I had was, what if we just swap the brother for the mom wholesale? But it was just going to be a lot of work. So I was like, I'll do it when I have an agent. I'll say, this is my plan. I'll rewrite it. And since I did not have the agent, I said, okay, this is the last draft. I'm going to make every change that I've ever thought of. And that was one of them. And it ended up being, in my opinion, the best, that was the best revision decision I've ever made in any book, was to switch that. And it was amazing how much easier the book became to write. It was amazing how everything sort of fit together, because we had Terrain's issues with Cantic, which was already a sort of mother figure. But when we have, and with Joshua and Aridin as well, but when we added in her actual mother, it just became a very thick, chewy, unpleasant thing for her to have to work through. All these different versions of who she could become, and all of them violent in their own way, except for Arnon, really, which was also one of the things that I'd always wanted to explore. And yeah, so pour one out for the Jackal, because she is one of my favorite characters to write and most interesting, I think, in the series.
I mean, I can see how it would have made some things make more sense, because I feel like a lot of when I'm trying to explain Terrain in the first book, a lot of it's like, well, it makes sense that she's having almost what feels like an about face, because like now she's being confronted with this strong familial tie. And how does, I think what's funny is because we're always either with Terrain or with Luca, it's so funny when like Luca sees both of them. It's like, oh yeah, these are like very related people. But like Terrain doesn't see it that way, because none of us ever go like, yeah, I'm exactly like my mom. Like no one ever.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm so glad that you put her in, because you're right, the Jackal is a fascinating character. All right, so I have asked a lot of my questions that I can spoiler free, and I don't really want to get into spoilers, because I think everyone should be allowed to be as devastated as me as they go through these books. But I was wondering, I know you, like you said, you had a novella come out at the same day as The Sovereign, right? Like that's a different publisher, I think. But what's on the future? You've teased potential spin-offs in this world, but what are projects that you are like really passionate about right now that are on your like draft table? If you're willing.
Yeah, I would love to chat about them. Though I will also say the spin-offs, uncontracted, but I do want to write little short stories. We'll see what happens. But for now, while there's like, I even have whole novels in my head about what could potentially happen after. I always wanted to write a prequel for the Old Guard. So Arnon, Joshua, and Cantic, way back before I even got the first deal, I wanted to write a book with them. But the actual books that I'm supposed to be writing right now, Warmongers is the next novel. I say this like it's a big hamburger because the first draft is almost 200,000 words. So I'm very excited. I frankly don't think it will get smaller. I think it will probably get bigger, because there's a lot I want to deal with and explore. And funnily enough, speaking of musicals, I was in the drafting process while becoming re-obsessed with Wicked, and I was like, oh, these are not that different. And the plot of Warmongers is that these two women are essentially rivals to lovers in this military. So they're both competing for essentially the top in the cohort. And eventually they find out that this army that they're fighting for isn't exactly what they thought they were fighting for. And they get to make a choice about where they will stand on either side, which seems to be something that I return to often. Again, it's a story of culpability and empire, but it's a dual timeline story. And so in one, we're getting the past where they meet, rival, fall in love, and make some decisions. Good ones, obviously. And in the present day, we are in one of them is trying to kill the other. So we don't know why that's happened, like what's happened in the intervening time until towards the end of the book. But yeah, so in that way, it felt actually quite a lot like Wicked. I was like, oh.
Nice. And do you envision that as a standalone, part of a longer series?
It is definitely a standalone. If I ever do other books in that, it will only be because I wanted to have a little fun writing a short story. Like, this is what happened when they went off in this particular year of their life. And this is what happened when they went on this little adventure. So it would be stuff that's interior to the narrative.
Nice.
The other things I have another novella that is scheduled to come out with Tor.com, the same as Fate's Bane, which is the novella that came out in September as well. But I am not done with that, and I don't know when it will come out. But that's the project that I'm working on right now. And another project just got announced. It is a Monster Slayer novella, which will come out with Grimdark magazine, which means I get to really, really indulge in my grimmest, darkest impulses. But also, I just wanted to make cool creatures. And it's about a girl from a pirate family who doesn't want to go to sea. She doesn't want to be poor and go to sea like so many of her folks. She wants to go off, make her fortune as a monster slayer, and bring that money back to marry her sweetheart. But the monster slayer she wants to apprentice to is like, kid, go home. No. And drags her back by the ear, leaves her there, and then they find out that all the monsters are, in fact, at home. So.
Nice. No, that's really fun. And now my last extra hard question is, what is your favorite book that you've written?
That I've written?
Yes. Who is your favorite child?
Well, this is unfair, partly because I think that the book I've most recently written is always my best book, because I've gotten better. And so at the moment, Warmongers is my favorite child. And honestly, I really cannot wait for people to read it, because even though it's a little shabby right now, it's a finished draft, but I'm waiting for feedback from my editor and from some early readers. And so one of the things is like accepting where it is right now. I think it is the best thing I've ever written in my life.
And so for you, your best is your favorite.
Yeah. And like, obviously, Tareen and Luca will always have my heart as well. But what will I call them? Nyekev and Dranyaha are the two warriors in this book, and they are harder, more desperate, meaner, a little older. Well, at one point they're older, and another part they're about the same age or younger. We get into things like the military-industrial complex and memory, how quickly we are to forget. We even have some undead. This time the gods are walking. We have gods on site, as it were. And we have like memory magic. No healing. There's no healing magic. So when people die, they die. Yeah, it was a place of new constraints, but also a structural experimentation with the two timelines that has been really gratifying to work on as a craftsperson. And also, it was a departure from my normal process as developed in like the second and third books of the trilogy, and even Fate's Bane, which were more outlined. This one, I had to go back to a very exploratory kind of mode. I started out trying to outline, and I had to write the outline to sell the book. But when I got back to it a few years later to actually write it, I was like, this is trash. None of this is what I want it to be. And I didn't have an answer for what I did want it to be, which meant a lot of rolling around on my floor with different brainstorming cards, like my story engine cards that I like to play with, and just figuring out what I wanted to do with this story. And a lot of world building helped me surprise myself. Like, I made up some cool creatures. I made up the gods, which were not there in quite such vivid placement. So yeah, that's
I'm now
right
very
now it's my
excited.
favorite.
I'm very excited for when we get to see that one. I don't know. You said that the novella is the one first, so I'm going to assume it's like probably 3 years out or something. I don't know. Publishing seems to.
It is odd, and because they're different publishers, they might not actually impact in the schedule. The Grimdark novella is coming out August 2026. That one is probably not going to change just because it's a very short time frame of editing and stuff, whereas the bigger houses will have much more going into it. And I think because they have so many more books in their schedule, they will probably not be in such a hurry to get it out. But who knows? Not me. Not me.
So your job is creating the story and everything like that. Well,
Yeah.
then, but now I'm curious because you thought I asked a different question. What is your favorite book?
This is why I didn't want. This is why I like the other question more. I guess I will say, because it's the one I always go to, The Traitor Bartered Cormorant by Seth Dickinson.
Nice.
Mostly because it's a good tragedy, and I found it after I'd already written a draft of the Unbroken. And in some ways, it gave me permission to do what I was already doing. It gave me permission to go harder into the things that I was kind of tiptoeing around. And it was just it was a great read. So.
And you mentioned that a lot of your friends, and I assume also just like some of your friends are probably authors and things like that. What was the funniest text that you got from someone when they were reading your stories and the things that you put them through?
Well, as you have read The Sovereign, I have the Warmongers. Warmongers is out with like a couple friends, and I have not gotten any messages from them about it yet. So hopefully there's good stuff to come. But with Sovereign, I'm sure you can guess 2 to 3 points where I would have gotten some messages. One really good message, like, you know, good for her now, good for her. And then another 2 points where I got a lot of like crying cat emojis or screaming cat emojis. Like, that little kitten with like watery eyes and the open mouth. I got a lot of those. Yeah.
I'll have you know, I read the cover scene at like 1 a.m, so it wasn't a great time.
I like that one a lot. I like that one. That was good. So that was actually, if you asking me what cover I like the most, that is actually the one I like the most. The Sovereign cover. I had to fight for it. And
for this cover, it's a beautiful cover.
There were, among other things, they took away the underboob, which I told them was very plot important. So, but when they asked, well, hey, what do you want to be on the cover of this book? Usually I just tell them Luca and some sort of royal paraphernalia. That's cool. And that's how we got the Faithless. With the caveat, I was like, she cannot have the crown on her head. It can be around, but she cannot be wearing it. And then the third one, I was much more specific. I was like, look, hi, I'm so glad you asked. I only been thinking about this for 3 years, and I sent them the chapter. And I don't know, maybe I highlighted it, put some arrows, like, this is the part, and this is the context. I need you to turn this into a picture. And so that was
it's amazing. Like, I was reading it with a bunch of people in my Discord, and you can spoiler block things, and people would go like, oh, this chapter, that's the cover. Yep. So yeah, well, this has been a delight. I'm really excited for Warmongers. I am excited to also get to your novellas, but I've been waiting for The Sovereign since 2021, so that was my top priority. And she is thick. She's the largest of all of them.
She is. The other two are 150,000, and she's 180. I think when I turned it in, it was 215 or something, and my editor was like, no. And so I got 180, and that's where we'll stay. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, you guys definitely need to read The Unbroken, and I guess Fate's Bane. What is that one about? In case people want to read a novella instead of a full trilogy.
Yeah, Fate's Bane is my Juliet, sad swamp lesbians. They are, instead of fighters and sword lesbians, they are cursed artificers. They can make stuff, but they've been cursed that they can put bad luck into anything that they make. So
Nice.
they may or may not accidentally start a clan war.
Nice. And if this video is up when I have the series review, that'll be down below. But otherwise, I do have my standalone review for The Unbroken down below. But honestly, just go read it. You don't need to see my review. It's great. And I will see you guys around.